Hey, you know what would make your customer service help desk way better? Dumping it and then switching to Intercom. But you're not quite ready to make that change. We get it. That's why Finn, the world's leading AI customer service agent, is now available on every help desk. Finn can instantly resolve up to 80% of your tickets, which makes your customers happier and gets you off the customer service rep hiring treadmill. Finn by Intercom, the leading customer service AI agent, now available on every help desk.
It's Saturday the 22nd of March. I'm Jamie East, and this was a week that saw Trump on the phone to Putin and Zelensky, a backlash over Labour's welfare reform plan, the long-lost astronaut splashdown in Florida, and tributes to an Irish F1 legend.
Grab a cup of something hot, put up your feet, and get up to speed on the 7 biggest stories of the week. This is the Standout 7 from the Smart 7.
It's news,
but not the news.
This week saw a stop-start approach to Russia's war on Ukraine. Despite Trump's campaign promise to end the war in 24 hours, there's been no significant progress as Vladimir Putin seems in no rush to stop the conflict. Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer took the lead for Europe and hosted a virtual summit of 29 international leaders last Saturday to discuss the next steps. Attendees included French President Macron and Ukrainian President Zelensky, and it focused on new commitments on peacekeeping and additional sanctions to keep pressure on Russia. Starmer said Putin's clearly dragging his feet and it's time for action.
The world needs action. So my message is very clear. Sooner or later, Putin will have to come to the table. So this is the moment that the barbaric attacks on Ukraine once and for all stop and agree to a ceasefire now.
President Macron signalled the plan could include several thousand French and British troops stationed at key locations in Ukraine. Trump was due to speak to Putin this week, but Finnish President Alexander Stubb said it's quite clear the Russian president doesn't want to engage.
I don't think Putin wants a ceasefire. Putin doesn't want a peace. His original aim was basically to destroy the independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. He hasn't changed his aim.
In advance of that call, Trump made references to dividing up territory and spoke about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, which is currently occupied by Russian forces. It's a key piece of Ukraine's energy infrastructure, and its loss would cause huge issues for Ukraine. However, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was sounding optimistic about her boss's ability to make a good deal.
As you know, the president announced that he will be speaking to President Putin. I won't get ahead of those negotiations, but I can say we are on the 10th yard line of peace, and we've never been closer to a peace deal than we are in this moment.
The long-awaited phone call took place on Tuesday with two very different views of how it went, with the White House describing a positive call in which Putin agreed to a ceasefire and attacks on energy infrastructure, and that talks would begin on a path to full and permanent peace. That didn't tally with Putin's view, though, as almost immediately after, drones and missiles were launched at Kyiv, and he made clear that any ceasefire would have to mean a total ban on military aid for Ukraine from any source. Zelensky responded, annoyed by a comment from military analyst Michael Clark on Sky News that said if Ukraine weren't at the table, they were on the menu.
I don't want us to be on Putin's menu. We are not salads, we are not compote for this man, despite his appetite. We see what he is like and that's it. We are an independent state.
Former Trump National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster told CNN he thinks Trump may have fallen for Putin's cunning plan.
Really what Putin wants to do is break apart the NATO alliance, break apart the transatlantic alliance, and be able to continue his broad effort to restore Russia to national greatness, essentially restore the Russian Empire.
Trump's telephone diplomacy continued on Wednesday as he had what he described as a frank but very good call with Zelensky. This call came after Ukraine and Russia exchanged drone and missile attacks overnight, but Zelensky's now signed up to Trump's proposed partial ceasefire on energy infrastructure targets. It remains to be seen if Putin will do likewise, but Zelensky sounded doubtful.
After Putin allegedly said that he would give the order to stop hitting Ukrainian energy targets, 150 drones struck energy targets, as were hospitals and civilian infrastructure. So, Putin's words are very different from reality.
Thursday saw EU leaders meet in Brussels to advance plans to put pressure on Putin to engage with the ceasefire. There are plans for tough new sanctions, but a larger EU aid plan for Ukraine, which could have been worth €40 billion, hasn't got any traction as yet. Keir Starmer was hosting military leaders in London with a brief to draw up a peacekeeping agreement in the event of a truce.
We're moving from concepts to military plans, and that's an important step forward because the timetable is moving into sharper focus, and obviously nobody knows what the outcome will be, but what I do know is that if there is a deal, we must be prepared.
Zelensky had a busy day joining the EU leaders over Zoom and heading to Oslo to meet with Norwegian PM Jonas Gahr Stone and agree a new €8 billion military aid package. He asked for continued pressure on Russia until a ceasefire can be agreed and an end to strikes on energy infrastructure.
We need to continue pressure Russia so that Putin stops manipulations and makes the concrete steps that all the world wants, and in particular one of the first steps must be silence in the sky.
The government's focus this week involved reform of the welfare system as Chancellor Rachel Reeves attempts to balance the budget ahead of next week's spring statement. There was growing concern over the potential for a freeze of the PIP, or Personal Independence Payment System, which is intended to help those with long-term physical or mental health issues or a disability. Health Secretary Wes Streeting said the intention of the reform is to make it easier for people to get back to work.
There's certainly a question about making sure people have got the right support to stay in work wherever possible. Going out to work is better for your mental and physical health than being stuck at home.
Tory Shadow Education Secretary Laura Trott said she's not convinced Labour have a clear and effective plan.
And I remember the Labour Party saying that there was no money to be saved from welfare whatsoever. There was not a welfare bill in their first King's speech. They're all over the place at the moment, divided and without a plan.
3.6 million people currently receive the payment, and backlash from charities and Labour backbenchers saw the notion of any freeze in the payment shelved. Long-serving Labour MP and mother of the House of Commons Diane Abbott said she thinks the government are approaching welfare reform in the wrong way.
I have no sympathy with the idea that the way to get people out of welfare is to cut the money they have to live on. I have no sympathy with the idea that it's a lifestyle choice.
Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall laid out her plan on Tuesday, starting with a set of measures intended to help people get back to work while also aiming to save £5 billion. That could affect the incomes of up to 1 million people, and the PIP scheme is expected to be dramatically restricted. The intention is to bring the welfare budget back to pre-pandemic levels as spending on working, age sickness and disability payments have climbed by £20 billion. Kendall says the aim is to unleash the talents of British people.
Millions of people who could work, trapped on benefits, denied the income, hope, dignity and self-respect that we know good work brings. And taxpayers paying millions more on the costs of failure.
The moves have attracted criticism from disability campaigners, and at least 30 Labour MPs are expected to vote against the plan when it comes before the Commons. Zara Sultana, who lost the whip as a Labour MP over her vote to scrap the two-child benefit cap, says the government are not listening to the public.
How can the government justify pushing more disabled people and children into poverty instead of pursuing fairer alternatives such as a 2% wealth tax on assets over 10 million? Is austerity 2.0 the change people really voted for?
At Prime Minister's Question Time, Keir Starmer was battling to justify the cuts in the face of protests.
The current system is morally and economically indefensible, and we're right to reform it, and nobody should be defending the broken status quo.
Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davies spoke to ITV News and says he's particularly concerned about the proposed cuts to incapacity benefit for those under the age of 22.
I am really worried that may well be, for our young people, a step too far. I mean, if some of those people really can't work, that would be just unfair. They'd be pushing them to poverty.
This week saw any hopes of a new ceasefire agreement in the Gaza conflict collapse as Israel resumed airstrikes and military operations in the Palestinian territory. More than 400 people died in a wave of deadly airstrikes, which signalled Israel's no intention of proceeding any further with discussions. The intention, according to Israeli Defence Minister Israel Katz, is that Hamas should feel that the gates of hell have opened and will not close until all hostages are released. The strikes come 2 weeks into a blockade of aid, power and water in Gaza, but Israeli PM Netanyahu was warning this is just the beginning.
I told you many times that if Hamas will continue to refuse, if it will not release our hostages, we will go back to fighting. And indeed, We have gone back to fighting.
Israeli forces then launched a new ground offensive in Gaza, aiming to recapture the Netzarim corridor, which essentially divides Gaza in two. There were more airstrikes too on Tuesday. As it emerged, they hit 2 UN guest houses, killing at least one member of staff and sparking calls from the agency for a full investigation. Deputy spokesman for the UN Secretary-General Farhan Haq addressed the issue at a news conference.
The special advisors say that these developments signal a troubling and dramatic escalation of violence with irreversible consequences. It is essential that the mutual imperatives of the peace process, integrating aspects of prevention and protection, are prioritized urgently.
Tens of thousands of Israelis took to the streets to protest against what they see as an attack on democracy by Netanyahu. They were calling for a new ceasefire and accusing the PM of deliberately prolonging the war to stay in power, as Israeli jets struck targets in Gaza again on Thursday, killing at least 90. In the House of Commons, Foreign Secretary David Lammy was also calling on Israel to resume the ceasefire and lift the ongoing blockade on aid and power.
We strongly oppose Israel's resumption of hostilities. We urgently want to see a return to a ceasefire. Hamas must release all the hostages and negotiations must resume.
Shadow Foreign Secretary Dame Priti Patel was more concerned about Lammy's remarks earlier in the week that Israel was breaking international law by imposing the blockade. The Foreign Secretary has since rode back on the remark, but Patel was concerned about the impact on the UK's relationship with Israel.
We need Israel to continue seeing the UK as a trusted partner. The strength of Britain's relationship with Israel also matters for our wider influence in the Middle East. Careless comments do not help.
Elon Musk's efforts to reduce the size of the US government have hit a number of speed bumps over recent weeks, with courts overturning some of his decisions and basic accounting errors leading to inaccurate claims about the savings made. A CNN survey showed Musk is both better known and less popular than Vice President J.D. Vance, which probably didn't please either of them, and protests continued this week at Tesla dealerships. Last weekend saw Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer vote with Republicans to keep the US government operating and avoid a federal shutdown, to the horror of many Democrats. However, House Speaker Mike Johnson, who's bought himself some time, wasn't in a mood to criticise Elon.
We wanted to pass a resolution that would effectively freeze spending so that the administration can continue its incredible work through DOGE and through the other efforts of the administration, but we haven't been able to get to it because we didn't have the algorithms that Elon has.
Monday marks St Patrick's Day, but there were probably more Irish people wincing than celebrating as the notorious Conor McGregor turned up at the White House. The former MMA fighter met Elon Musk, Secretary of Defence Peter Hegseth, and even got to meet Donald Trump in the Oval Office. Trump's apparently a big fan of the UFC and mentioned McGregor last week when meeting the Irish Taoiseach. The Irish government weren't thrilled by the visit, though, as McGregor, who's leaned into far-right rhetoric, spoke from the podium, with Micheál Martin calling his remarks simply wrong.
What is going on in Ireland is a travesty. Our government is the government of zero action. Our money is being spent on overseas issues that has nothing to do with the Irish people. The illegal immigration racket is running ravage on the country. There are rural towns in Ireland that have been overrun in one swoop.
Thursday saw Trump focus on one of his campaign promises to shut down the US Department of Education. It seems counterintuitive, but Trump claims it'll save money and allow the states to have a greater role in the education and curriculum of young people. The move in theory requires an act of Congress, but Trump held a ceremony in which he signed an executive order in the East Room, so it's not exactly clear what's going to happen next. Former White House staffer Marici Vinton is one of those federal employees who was made redundant by Elon's Department of Government Efficiency, and she says the whole thing was a chaotic experience.
I love efficiency. That's why I joined government. I joined government to make, those interactions simpler. What I feel like is happening is very not targeted. It is almost just randomly and chaotically firing people, not based on a mission or what their outcomes or what they're trying to accomplish. And so I think that their approach to efficiency has actually been pretty inefficient.
Still to come on the Standout 7 in association with Metro, good news for Nicola Sturgeon and tributes to an Irish F1 legend. Right after this.
Hey, you know what would make your customer service help desk way better? Dumping it and then switching to Intercom. But you're not quite ready to make that change. We get it. That's why Finn, the world's leading AI customer service agent, is now available on every help desk. Finn can instantly resolve up to 80% of your tickets, which makes your customers happier and gets you off the customer service rep hiring treadmill. Finn by Intercom. the leading customer service AI agent, now available on every help desk.
Welcome back.
Only last week, former SNP First Minister Nicola Sturgeon announced she was intending to step down as an MSP in 2026. She's had a tough few years with a dramatic resignation from her leadership role, and she found both herself and her husband under suspicion of embezzlement in 2023. Thursday saw her now ex-husband Peter Murrell appear in Edinburgh Sheriff's Court on a single charge. Sturgeon and former SNP Treasurer Colin Beattie were formally cleared by Scottish police and told they were no longer under investigation. Speaking to the media in Glasgow, Nicola was relieved to be completely in the clear, an outcome she said she had always expected.
For almost 2 years I have had this cloud of investigation hanging over me. To reach this point today is obviously something I am relieved about. I've been trying to get on with my life and I now intend to do that.
Tuesday night saw the long-awaited return of Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore to planet Earth. The two NASA astronauts left Earth in June 2024 for an 8-day test flight on Boeing's new Starliner capsule. However, things didn't go too well. The Starliner was plagued with technical difficulties and eventually returned to Earth without any passengers, leaving Butch and Sunny lost in space, or at least on the International Space Station. Now, finally 9 months later, they returned to Earth in a Dragon X spaceship, splashing down off the coast of Florida, where they were greeted by a pod of curious dolphins. We'll have more details on their experience in this weekend's episode of the Sunday 7, but former astronaut Tim Peake says they'll be glad to get a break after a hectic few days.
Final days are very busy. You're trying to wrap up all of your own personal administration, and of course you're preparing the spacecraft for re-entry procedures as well. And for Butch and Sunny, I think it'll be a very nostalgic moment.
The world of sport lost a real character on Thursday with the death of Eddie Jordan. He was a champion kart racer, a Formula One team owner, a beloved TV pundit and occasionally a rock and roll drummer, and he passed away aged 76 after a prolonged battle with prostate cancer. Jordan grew up in Dublin and discovered motor racing in the summer of 1970. He went on to set up the Jordan Formula One team in 91, which saw him give Michael Schumacher his Formula One debut, and he famously scored a 1-2 at the Belgian Grand Prix in 98 when Damon Hill and Ralf Schumacher dominated the podium. Jordan sold the team and switched his attention to TV punditry, although he's also credited with the deal that saw designer Adrian Newey switch from Red Bull to Aston Martin. The world of motor racing joined in paying tributes to the Irishman on Thursday, including his Grand Prix winning driver Damon Hill. Rest in peace, Eddie.
He was irreverent, he was crazy, he influenced everyone, and there isn't a single person in that era and since really has not been affected positively in some way by Eddie. He never stopped, he never wasted a single second of his life.
You've been listening to The Smart 7. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Hit that follow button and have a great day. Give us 7 minutes and we'll give you the world.
Savor the best of spring with great everyday prices at Whole Foods Market. Yellow low price signs help you save money without compromising quality. Like on organic chicken breast and thighs, ground beef, and more. All with no antibiotics ever. Plus, brighten your plate for less with 365 by Whole Foods Market Brioche. Smoked salmon, cherry tomatoes, organic apples, and more. Shop low prices daily at Whole Foods Market in-store and online.